Hey everybody, welcome to Sports Insider. Chris Fedor is back. We've got a packed show for you today on St. Patrick's Day. Mary Kay Cabot will talk Browns. Joe Vardon will talk Cavaliers. Bud Shaw will give us his spinoffs. And if we're able to get him, because Terry Francona is talking, I believe, right now, we'll try and talk to Paul Hoynes from Goodyear. But if not, we'll see what happens. We do have Mary Kay Cabot on the phone, though, so let's talk some Browns football. Mary Kay, how are you?
I'm doing great, guys. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Mary Kay. Of course, the Browns, look, if people didn't believe that this was a complete teardown, they do now. Carlos Dansby is gone. Dwayne Bowe is gone. Who's next? I know you wrote something on cleveland.com about it. Who should we watch for?
Well, I think, and I will be doing something a little later today on this as well, too, but I think, anybody that right now that is over 30 is somebody that they're going to look at, especially, of course, if they have a larger contract, because obviously in this sort of teardown, they're planning for the future. They're trying to clear out cap space. They're trying to acquire draft picks, and they just don't need to be paying 30-somethings, $6-7 million a year. So those are the guys to look at. It remains to be seen. I mean, you've got guys like Joe Thomas. Will he be traded on draft day or before or somewhere around there? You've got even a Josh McCown. I have said that, if they do land a Colin Kaepernick, I really do think that they would probably either try to trade or do something with Josh McCown. He's 36. So there are a number of guys in that category. I talked to Dante Whitner yesterday. He said he's not too worried, and I don't think he has anything to worry about right now. But we're going to have to see how this thing plays out over the next couple months.
Mary Kay, you brought up the name Colin Kaepernick. Where do the Browns stand with Cap, and where do you think the interest is with them compared to a team like Denver?
Well, you know what? Everyone really is kind of in a holding pattern right now, and I think people are waiting to see just exactly what it is that the 49ers are going to do or what their plans are for when his contract has to be guaranteed on April 1st. So, maybe these teams are going to try to, stare down the 49ers a little bit and see if they're just willing to let him go. I mean, he doesn't want to be there. Why would you want to have a guy on the roster that doesn't want to be there? Now, he has said, according to the San Jose Mercury News, I think it is, someone told them that he is not going to skip the off-season program, which begins April 4th, if they keep him around. So, if that's true, then, maybe they won't let him go on April 1st. But they want a second-round pick. From what I understand, the Browns are at least willing to possibly go with 3 if they can redo the contract. The Broncos don't want to go that high at all. So I don't know how it's going to turn out at this point, actually.
Now, if the Browns did budge and give up a second-round pick, which would seem unlikely, and that's essentially a first-round pick right now, would that change their thinking at number 2? Would they still go quarterback at number 2?
You know what? First of all, I really don't see them going all the way up to number 32 to get a Kaepernick. I do not see that happening. I know they're even reluctant to give up the 3rd. That would probably, again, only happen if they could be satisfied with the money situation. But I think regardless of what draft pick they give up or what it takes to get Colin Kaepernick, they still have to go quarterback with number 2. They have to. You have to. This is a rebuild. And, it doesn't matter if one of these guys isn't going to be ready next year or the year after. Develop him for a couple of years if you have to, but you have to get him. You have to get him in the fold and get working with him. Now, what I don't know is, have they determined that Wentz or Goff really isn't their man? I mean, it has to be your guy. You don't want to have to solve the problem. You want to have someone on your roster that is going to be your guy. So if they don't love one of those guys and they like somebody better at 32, then maybe you wait and you go with a Connor Cook or a Paxton Lynch or one of those guys.
Mary Kay, in conversations that you've had with people around the NFL, do you get the feeling that the NFL believes that either Jared Goff or Carson Wentz is worthy of the 2nd overall pick, or do you get the feeling that people around the NFL believe that there isn't a quarterback worthy of the number 2 pick?
No, you know what? I actually have gotten pretty good reviews, especially on Carson Wentz. I mean, most people really seem to think that he is the real deal. I've had a few people that have questioned Jared Goff, and at one point, I think someone even thought that Paxton Lynch had surpassed Jared Goff after the combine. In terms of the interview, we had heard reports that he did not interview well with the Browns, Jared Goff I'm talking about. I've been told by several people that that's actually true, even though Hugh Jackson didn't feel that way about it. I have been told that, there is something there. So if that's the case, then they probably would be looking at a Carson Wentz. But yes, from what I can gather from league types, they think these guys, both of those guys, will be the real deal.
So, Mary Kay, looking at free agency, again, we know the Browns' approach right now. They're going to sign young guys that are cheap, take some flyers on guys. Will they add anyone else significant in free agency, do you think? Or anyone significant in free agency?
Yeah, I don't think so. And Dan, I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet, but I see that you put up, I think it's a slideshow today, so check that out, everyone, on some free agents that are still available that the Browns might be interested in. And I don't think that they're going to go out and sign a bunch of guys we've ever heard of. But there are holes that they can fill with some, with a few guys here and there, and those things, might happen. But when you get to this point, there's really not that many guys out there that are any good. When you get to June 1st, sometimes some more guys become available. But at this point, you're really looking at trying to get as many good draft picks as you can.
Mary Kay, why the short-term deals for these guys?
Well, in a case like Raheem Moore, he was benched midway through last season. I mean, he lost his job. So you're looking at a guy who's trying to rehabilitate his career, and you don't know if it's going to work out. So, you're not going to commit long-term money to him. And to a lesser extent, the same thing with Demario Davis. He, in the last 6 games of the season, he started to lose a bunch of reps to another linebacker by the name of Aaron Henderson. Mm-hmm. And so it was another case of, the Jets were sort of phasing him out. So you're not going to go throw, a ton of money in a bunch of years and a lot of guaranteed money at a guy who was another team sort of, kind of cast off a little bit. So that's basically the reason.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot, our Browns beat reporter. Thanks for the time, Mary Kay.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that free agency list I put together, it's not impressive. I'll tell you that much. I mean, Ruben Randall is probably the best guy,
wow.
At least when you kind of restrict yourself to age and things like that. And of course, Andre Smith is now off the market. He's going to Minnesota, he just announced. So there's not a lot out there for the Browns if they do still want to play the free agency game.
They're playing a dangerous game too, Dan. I understand what they're doing. I understand that they have a specific philosophy in place and they have a plan, and I give them a lot of credit for that because not too many regimes have come here with a plan. But, part of their plan is draft and develop. And you wonder how that development is going to happen when whoever these young players are that they're going to bring in are not surrounded by people that allow them to grow and allow them to have success. You wonder how that's going to work. Think David Carr in Houston. Mm-hmm. Think some other guy, Tim Couch with the Cleveland Browns in 1999. Having people around you and being put in an environment to thrive and grow and develop and succeed, that matters in the NFL. And the Browns don't have any more good players.
Yeah, it's going to be a long season. All right, let's switch gears and talk about a team that is going to go to the playoffs. The Cavaliers. We're joined by Joe Vardon. Joe, how are you?
Doing fine, guys. Ready for the tournament here.
All right, Joe. Who'd you pick? We got to know that.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think I picked Kansas, but, my guess is as good as anyone's, or not as good as anyone's.
All right, Joe. Let's talk Cavaliers, and let's talk about LeBron James. Had the rest night last night. Look, we kind of know where the Cavaliers are. Toronto is chasing them in the standings, but it would be unlikely that the Cavs aren't the number 1 seed in the East. How much rest is LeBron James going to end up getting between now and mid-April?
Well, Dan, I think that's a pretty good question. I mean, I bet he sits at least 4 more games. They have, 15 to go. So, yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of back-to-back still to be had, and he apparently is going to play in both of them over the weekend. But you look at Monday at home, a possibility to rest, and if not then almost certainly Thursday in Brooklyn as an opportunity. And then to start April, they have another back-to-back in Indiana and Milwaukee. And I think even before that, there's like a home game and then one in Atlanta. So, among all those, he's going to sit. He almost guaranteed to sit the finale, which I think is against the Pistons, who, by the way, if the playoffs started today, that would be your first-round opponent. So, yeah, he's going to sit some games. And just as a side note, most of them are probably going to be at home. So I feel bad for the folks who've got tickets for late March and April, but that's how it goes.
How did Ty get to this point, Joe? Because a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a month ago, he mentioned that the goal of the Cavs was to get the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and he said, hey, we're not going to rest guys until we feel like we're comfortable with that number 1 seed or we have that number 1 seed locked up. So where did the change come from? What happened there?
Yeah, I think it was a specific moment, and it was the home game, and I can't even remember now who they were playing. You probably remember, but LeBron was just awful. It might even have been against the Pistons. He was so bad, and it was after a stretch of games. I think it might have been even a back-to-back. It was. He played Sunday in Oklahoma City and did great, and the team did great, and they came home on a Monday and played the Pistons, and then it was his worst game in 2 years, and he just looked tired, and I think that was all Ty needed to see to kind of change directions and go back to this idea that, rest is better than work at this point.
Joe, let's talk about Kyrie Irving. We saw him last night without LeBron James. And, look, the guy scores a lot more without LeBron. That's obvious. He also gets a lot more shots. There's been a lot of talk about Kyrie as a point guard. Is he doing enough to develop as a true point guard, or are people blowing that out of proportion? I mean, Kyrie kind of is who he is.
No, I don't think people are blowing it out of proportion, much to the chagrin of the 7 people on Twitter who were killing me about it last night, but, were pretty vocal about it. But, I mean, listen, LeBron James is your leading scorer, okay, and he still finds a way to get 6.5 assists per game. So this is a big deal. And, the guy who has the ball in his hands the most needs to find a way to distribute. LeBron finds ways to score 30 or 25 or 27 and also have like anywhere from 4 to 8 or 9 assists. Like, he can do that. And Kyrie can do the same thing. And it's just all about keeping the rest of the guys in the flow, keeping the ball moving, because when you get into these situations where you're literally trying to dribble 1-on-3, you turn the ball over. And Kyrie did some great things last night, but he had some killer turnovers towards the end. And a lot of it was just because the ball had stopped. It stopped in his hands. So this is one thing that he does need to improve.
To your point, Joe, the other thing that I think Kyrie has to realize, this team doesn't have a lot of guys that can create their own shot. You've got LeBron who can create, Kyrie can create for others, and Delly every now and then can do that, but you don't want that consistently. You don't want to give him a whole bunch of minutes. Other than that, you've got a bunch of specialists. So it's up to Kyrie to help J.R. Smith when he's out there, help Channing Frye, help these other guys, because they're not good enough to go out there and get their own shot when LeBron's not there.
No, that's exactly right. And I go back to, these prolific scorers who can do this. Russ Westbrook does it. Yep. Steph Curry, who, I more and more I think of Kyrie like him as an offensive player. And I think, Kyrie could shoot not quite as good as that, but in there, and then he can finish better than Steph. But the thing is that Steph moves without the ball, and he gets you between 4.5 and 6.5 assists per game. It's something that the best players do, and like you said, Chris, like you said, I mean, it's a way for him to make other people better, and he's got to do it.
All right, Joe, last question here. We've already talked about Kyrie. That's something to watch. But What else are you watching with this team as they prepare for the playoffs?
I mean, I'm watching how they defend. I know that that's kind of what the front office is looking at, just this improvement on the defensive end, which there has been over the last several. Otherwise, I'm just looking at health. I want to see them. I do want to see them hold off Toronto, just from a Cavs perspective. I know, that they're signaling that they just want to be healthy more so than in first place when it's all said and done. But I think this team needs to do it. I think they need to find a way to stay above Toronto, nail down that home court, and just accomplish something because, this season has been so much about, they're just going to the finals and that's it. But in the meantime, there's been all these mild disappointments, in part because the Warriors are so good. So I just think that it would be a nice ribbon around this otherwise forgettable regular season if they can finish first. That I would like to see that.
All right, Joe Vardon, thanks for the time.
Okay, guys. Thanks.
All right, we're going to call an audible here and send it over to a guy who never passes the ball either.
He's not dressed in green either.
Not well, anyway, that's for sure. Well, thanks, guys. Everybody knows that the tear down is always easier than the rebuild for bad teams. There have been few exceptions to this. Maybe when the Cavs and Jim Paxson found a taker for bloated Sean Kemp and his even more bloated contract back in the day. I mean, that certainly was heavy lifting. The Browns not re-signing 4 free agents who were starting for them and playing at a relatively high level is easy enough on its own, but it makes the challenge harder on the other end. You can only do so much in the draft, and that's if you happen to pick winners a lot more often than you pick busts. Browns chief of strategy, Paul DePodesta, says teams doubting the Browns is, quote, part of the fun, end quote. It's also part of the anxiety for Browns fans who recognize just how far this team has to go to be competitive. One commenter says, big deal, the Browns are simply getting rid of players who went 3-13. Oh. To which the answer comes, in preparation for going, 0-16? The Browns are building a football team, not solving a math problem or working a Sudoku. Their success will require them to sign free agents at some point who can actually help. And it will require them to be better at talent evaluation in the draft. I mean, Stephen Hawking is smarter than anybody running an NFL team. It doesn't mean he'd be good at telling the difference between, say, Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. Our next commenter is obviously overstating the point when he looks at the exodus of good players from Berea and says the best football players in this town are LeBron and Delly. But you can feel his pain. That kind of skepticism, though, will get you dressed down in a Browns-centric town. This final comment says it's a 2 to 3 year rebuild, so making any judgments before 2018 is just being negative. Yeah, come on now, get with the program. I mean, when has a new regime with a new plan ever left a Browns fan high and dry around here? Guys?
It is great to be kind of under the radar and have people doubting you, but usually that's in terms of like, hey, we're an up-and-coming team, and nobody believes in us.
Well,
as opposed to, we're probably going to go in 16 this year.
I think
we might go 2-14.
I think Chris made a good point. We always talk about how important it is to have a mentor for a quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. But how about these other positions? Yeah. Not important at all?
Right.
And I'm not suggesting they should have kept Carlos Dansby. I think he fits that mold of a guy who, 34 years old, going to be 35, making a lot of money. I understand all that. But when you start letting guys go in their mid-20s who are playing close to a Pro Bowl level, whatever you may think of the Pro Bowl selections, I think you're asking for more trouble than you need to.
Yeah, that's certainly a concern as the Browns move forward. Losing Mitchell Schwartz is going to be one of those things that I think this team is going to regret.
You think?
The other guys, okay, you can make a case, but man, a good right tackle in today's NFL at 26 years old.
Yeah. And it's funny, too, yesterday when Carlos Dansby was let go, and again, I get it. I get where the Browns are. I get where he is in his career. I tweeted out that he was the team leader in tackles for loss, interceptions, and touchdowns on defense. There's 4 categories where the same guy led them. And somebody responded saying, well, somebody has to on a bad team. Like, this isn't basketball where some dude's just going to pile up a bunch of stats because there's nobody else there to get rebounds. There are other guys on the field, 6 of them really, that can get tackles, and yet Carlos led them. There are other guys that can get tackles for loss, and yet he led them. There are other dudes who play in the secondary, by the way, not linebacker, who can intercept passes, and yet he led them. Perhaps maybe he was a good player. Maybe, possibly. I mean, he leads the NFL in tackles since 2004. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think that was just him being on bad teams his entire career.
Dansby was he was very good last year, especially in the second half of the season. He's a really good player. You hate to see that guy go, but I do hope he ends up somewhere where he can actually get to the playoffs and maybe, as he said, win a Super Bowl. All right, no Hoynesy today, unfortunately. He's actually working, so we won't have him. But our thanks to Mary Kay Cabot and Joe Vardon, of course, to Bud Shaw as well. He's Chris Fedor. I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.